Now we've got the World War I draft record for Lindsay Herbert Phelps.
World War One.
So once again, instead of saying RFD, they just say Root 2.
Mm-hmm.
We've got his age. We have his birth date, February 18th, 1878. And then down below, we can see he's in Roper. So your family's been in Roper since the 1800s. We've got his wife, Maggie. And we've got more of his address, and then you can see his signature down at the bottom. But what's kind of interesting is you see how it says Lindsay X Herbert Phelps?
Yeah.
Usually when you see something like that, the X is their mark. So,
oh, yeah?
So that would mean that he didn't know how to write.
Oh, yeah?
Someone else had to sign his name?
So someone, basically what they did is, and you can tell because the writing is the same writing as what was in the upper parts, which was written out by, as far as I understand, it was written out by like a person working there.
Oh,
so you can see it's the same handwriting, and then you see that X right in the middle. And then you see right underneath, it actually does say Mark.
Ah, okay.
So, so back in, and you know, this is 1917 that the World War I draft happened. The United States declared war on Germany, and then a month later they enacted the draft. And so this was, this is 1917, and he's, 1878. So he's, 39? So he's a farmer, doesn't know how to write, probably doesn't really know how to read, and just, he's living off the land.
Hell, he can shoot a rifle, though. Guarantee you that.
Probably.
Speaking of World War I, like when we went to war with Germany, what was that? Like you said, the draft happened in 1917.
Yeah, 1917.
We went over there and kicked their ass, and like not even 30 years later, we had to go kick their ass again. It's like, dude, did you not learn from the first one? Come on, like, come on. All right, continue.
Well, it was the first one that kind of caused the second one in a sense. But,
yes, yeah, true.
Okay, so now we've got the marriage for Lindsay Phelps and Maggie Burris. And so we had already seen, his parents, Kirby and Elizabeth. But, I thought this was just interesting. Another North Carolina wedding certificate. And you can see here the son of C.L.U. Phelps. So that's Kirby. But for some reason, they have it as like Clue or something. And I actually found a couple of places where he's like, there was a census record where he was written like that, like Curly was what they called him.
Huh.
But it could have just been that, his name was Kirby and then the guy heard Curly.
Yeah.
So,
which you talked about in one of your videos.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how they do that. So check that out, people.
Exactly. So then, you can see kind of all the same stuff. Father's living. Now we get the maiden name of your third great grandmother. Or sorry, this is your second great grandmother, Maggie Burgess.
Oh, okay.
And she was of Nash County.
Huh.
I think that's Nash. It might not be.
Hash?
Might be. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. So, but then you get, daughter of John Burgess and Fanny Burgess. And the father was living, the mother is dead. So now, now we've got her parents. So we've got all these different people. So now we want to find more information. So let's go to the next slide. So now here we actually have a picture of Lindsay Herbert Phelps and Maggie Burgess. So these are your second great grandparents.
That does not look like me too much.
So these are your grandfather's grandparents.
So that's like super interesting because if you see a picture of my grandfather, like that's very close to my grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah, like extremely close. Ridiculous.
So
that's cool. Where'd you get that picture from?
That picture I actually got from the wife of one of your uncles. She had it up on Ancestry.com.
Oh, nice.
So yeah.
Wow.
Your family's done some work on their genealogy. That's why I figured this would be perfect, because if there's anything that your family knew about, it would be this stuff. Because I wouldn't be surprised if you like said any of this to your dad and he was like, "Oh yeah, I knew about some of this," or "I bet he's seen that picture."
Some of the names that you've dropped here, I don't know much about I don't know much about my dad's side, or really, I know more about my mom's side, but still not that much. Like I've heard names. But I've heard a lot of these names dropped within my family conversations with my dad's side. Like I've heard Kirby before.
So now you're getting a bit more context of like the names and the people.
Yeah, a little bit more context of who they were, because I've heard like Leela. I've heard Leela before, but I didn't know who that was in relation to me. Like I just heard, Leela's over there doing this and that.
It's like, really interesting because she passed. I'm pretty sure, I can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure she passed away while you would have still been alive. I think she passed away in like the 90s or something.
I believe so. Yeah.
So
makes sense. Yeah. But I heard I've heard stories about it, Yeah. So especially now that you're saying it, like the whole farming aspect, when my family was farmers, like I knew that.
Yeah.
But I forgot about it. So
yeah,
it's bringing back things.
Yeah. So here we've got the 1900 census. You can see up top Curly Phelps. Yeah. Then below, his wife Elizabeth. Then we have their children, Charles W., Lindsay H., which you can see spelled differently, and that's your great great grandfather. His sister Indiana, their sister Lena, and then the son Lonnie. Excuse me, it's Lonnie. The 1900 census is one of the more interesting censuses to me because it has a lot of really interesting information. Mm-hmm. So, you can see the next column, wife, son, all of that tells you the setting in the household. Then you got the next column where it tells you their color. So you can see W for white. And once again, if you look below, you'll see B for black. So they're still, they're living in a mixed neighborhood in a sense. Although it is rural, so it's, it's not like your neighbors like right next to you, but they, they were neighbors for at least 40 years, so they probably knew each other very well. Mm-hmm. So, my bad. I thought the break was done with that. No. Wait until I say next slide. Ooh. Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, that's usually the best policy. Yeah. Okay, so then we have next to that female and male. Then this one's really interesting because they don't just give you the year that they were born, they give you the month and the year. But one thing I found is that a lot of times that's incorrect, especially because asking the neighbors, they're like, well, how old are they? I don't know. Like, think about saying how old your neighbors are, then think about trying to figure out what month and year they were born.
Yeah, fuck that.
So
that'd be crazy. So
then next to that, you have their ages, and then you have married or single. And then next to that, like you'll see up top next to Curly and Elizabeth, it says 27. That's how many years they've been married. Right, so they've been married, 27 years. Now, the next two columns are the ones that are the really, really interesting ones for the 1900 census. Mm-hmm. That first column where you see the 7, that's how many children were born to Elizabeth. Doesn't always necessarily mean it was Elizabeth and wasn't the husband's children too, but usually it was. But then the next column is how many of those children are still alive. Okay. So your third great grandparents had 7 children, but one of them had died before 1900. And if you notice the ages of all of your of all of the children when they were born, it goes from like 1876 to 1889. So that child was probably born somewhere in there. So if this is 1900, we know that child probably didn't live past their 20s.
Okay.
Could have been a stillborn, could have been anything. So, but that's just one of the really, really, really interesting parts. And what's really cool too is if you look down, the next household, you'll see a James Phelps and a Sarah Phelps. And I don't know exactly how they're related. I haven't looked into that yet. It's more than likely that they're related.
The interesting thing I find about this is if you go down the column of the married or single, they couldn't figure out if Lonnie was married or single.
They probably didn't even put it because he was 13.
No, he's just...
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. They probably... A lot of the census takers did a little differently because, I've looked at census. It's the 1900 census, but you look at them from New York, North Carolina, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and they all do them just a little differently or put little different types of marks or things. So this guy may have just been like, I'm not even going to put it. It's a 13-year-old. He's not going to.
He could have told him not to put it because maybe he's a player and doesn't want everyone to know.
That could be.